Hi, welcome to the Edge of Eternity set review. This is for the Alchemy set. It got just previewed a couple days ago. I also just want to put out, if you guys want the full descriptions of the cards, check out the preview video on the official Magic the Gathering Arena channel. The Amazonian did an amazing job previewing all of these. These are mostly my thoughts on the cards and kind of describing what sort of current decks or potential decks that we could put them in. So please don't tell me I copied her video because I didn't. But yeah, without further ado, let's get started on the white cards. The full Edge of Eternity's Alchemy set has been fully reviewed on the official Arena YouTube. So it's time to talk spoilers. Starting off with a new simple spaceship, Candela acts as an instant speed protection spell, bouncing one of your creatures to hand while also buffing it. It's very similar to Nurturing Pixie, with the upside of Flash, but the downside of only bouncing your creatures. If you manage to turn on Candela, it can also allow you to get ETBs out of your small creatures without having to spend mana, allowing you to hold up more bounce effects or play more creatures. It's a bit niche though, and it will most likely only go in decks that want a cheap spacecraft. And speaking of spacecraft decks, Squadron Carrier makes all of your spacecraft come with an extra body for only 1 mana. Paying 1 mana for a starfighter pilot is an insane rate. On its own, Squadron Carrier compares to an upgraded Wedgelight Rammer, which makes a better body and replaces First Strike with giving all of your creatures flying. It can even be flickered to reset the exhaust, not just for itself, but for all of your spacecraft too. A mono white spacecraft deck is shaping up, and with the Candela from earlier, as well as cards like Lumen Class Frigate, I'm excited to try out. We even get a decent support piece in Stoic Star Captain. It acts as both a lord for stationing as well as card advantage. Between its ability in Lumen and all of the starfighter pilots you will have, stationing up your spacecraft should be a piece of cake. Teleportation is our last white card, and one of the cards that is most dependent on the format you play it in. The color changing ability is mostly irrelevant from what I can tell. In a traditional white deck, you'd probably want the disruption most against board wipes, which this does nothing against. It does pretty well against all the efficient removal spells and card draw in the format though. Cloud Scooped Armorer is a form of protection card draw all in one. The easiest way to trigger armor is with counters that can be removed on their own without you needing to spend extra resources. The best options I could find were the Impending Creatures, and Lurker synergizes nicely with the Seeking. Dreamdew Entrancer gets even more value from targeting your own creatures too. Activating a minus on a Planeswalker or having it take damage also counts, so there are some unexpected ways to get value from it. When I first read Hydroponics Architect, I missed an important part of the card. It makes your lands basic islands in addition to their other types. I read that as a downside, acting as sort of a harbinger of seas to the lands in your deck. Instead, it turns your lands into better true duels, making them tutorable or fetchable by anything that gets basics or islands. It can come down turn 1, has evasion, and while it's slow, it does grant card advantage. It seems to me like the perfect tempo card. We've received a few artifact support cards, including the Love Chant of Negate and Spell Pierce. You will have to be fully dedicated to the artifact game plan, but because this tracks artifacts on your hand, it means you can even have this ready by turn 1. 4 artifacts split between your hand and the battlefield isn't too hard to act. Network Marauder is the cousin to Simulacrum Synthesizer. What it lacks for in shared board presence, it makes up for in its resilience. Rather than making a body that is large immediately, it slowly but steadily buffs all of your future artifact creatures. This can be an upside on the chance that your board gets wiped, as the power boost does stick around. It doesn't affect tokens and kind of has an entirely different game plan to Synthesizer, which does make me think they are for different decks entirely. Other black cards have to be talked about at once, as they all seem to be built around Cantor over Frame as a recursive threat. Between the card itself, Void Call Devotee, and Song of Point Prime, your graveyard is going to be full of Cantors ready to hop in and out of the graveyard. We've already seen cards like Timeline Caller and Umbral Card Zealot be powerhouses in Aristocrat decks, and they fit right into this warp-themed deck. Gravitic Herald is another way to trigger warp for basically free, returning all of your Cantors to the battlefield. The deck practically builds itself, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. I think the deck itself is going to be very interesting and fun to build, but the cards are almost too narrow to fit anywhere else. It's nice when a card has multiple applications and can show up in a variety of decks. The last black card manages to do this better. Monolith's Graveliner is a cheap way to grant your creatures Death Touch and Lifelink, which are both powerful abilities, especially when combined. It is a downside that you won't be able to block with your Death Touch creatures right away, but because of the perpetual mechanic, it's great with creatures that can bring themselves back from the yard, like the Cantors previously mentioned, or even Bloodghast. And because these creatures can't block anyway, tapping them to station is no longer a downside. It's also a spacecraft and can be a way to upgrade the massive number of StarCraft pilots you may be getting from their squadron carrier. Moving on to red, we of course have to start with the 5-mana Flying Haste Dragon of the set. If you want to put a dragon jumpster before this card, or right after I say the sign, that'd be really cool. But anyway, Flying and Haste are good, but an Alchemy card wouldn't be complete without an ability that it could completely whiff on you. Getting a random 3-drop each turn is definitely worth it from a mana efficiency perspective, but it really depends on how often it can roll into a dud. Those would be creatures that do absolutely nothing for you, like something with Defender or creatures that actively hurt you. That does scale with its power, which means you can directly influence it with its fire-breathing ability, and usually a higher power will bring better results, but not always. That's the main issue with any sort of random effect though, and until it gets playtested more, I'm inclined to believe that you'll usually get your mana's worth. The conjured creature is also exiled by a trigger at your end step, so you can do some shenanigans if it dies in combat, or if you use the spell to flicker it, but that's too hard to build around without really knowing what creature you're getting. Mom, can we have terminal velocity? No, we have terminal velocity at home. Overall, I'd say that velocity is still a better card. Any large creatures you are cheating into play will keep their original power and toughness, and it also doubles as a board wipe, which can help you survive a crackback or open the board for your next turn. Caveron Consumed, however, has some notable upsides and a higher floor for worse situations. Even if you drop an artifact, it will always turn into a creature and it will always be a 4/4. This means if you have a utility creature instead of something with a flashy ETB or attack trigger, you can still get a decent attack out of it. It also does cost a mana less, which means if the body is not what you need, you can still get that effect for 1 mana less. I could see a deck that's running both though, just for consistency. Flametongue Kabu is a classic Magic card, and I'm happy to see it show up again. And this time, it's free! If you jump through the hoops, at least. So, the question comes down to, is Mind Security worth it? It's definitely an aggressive card. Having Trample does make it feel less bad to be blocked by an opponent's 1/1. And if your opponent trades, they're basically down 2 creatures, because when the Flametongue enters, it can't pick off whatever's left. If you're playing an aggressive threat, it is a cheap threat that comes with removal and a decent body, although you do have to wait for it. It also makes 2 Kavus if you are playing a Kavu Kindred deck. I think it's enough of a threat to make it worth it, actually. Don't be fooled by his land destruction option. That's not what Thendar the Overminer is about. While it can't be used to ruin your opponent's fixing or utility lands, it makes any other land destruction cards you run actively negative for you, as it will start netting your opponent wastes. Thendar is definitely a secret landfall card which doubles up your Fabled Passages, or removes the downsides from your Larval Scoutlander, assuming you sacked a non-basic. It's a very interesting way to wrap yourselves, especially in red, and it has the upside of messing with your opponent's mana base too. We're already done with red cards, so moving on to green, where the 5-color planets seem to be the theme. Brood Astronomer is a classic mana dork for 2, with the added benefit of being able to swap out one of your current lands for a planet. Seeing 3 out of the 5 cards gives you a decent amount of control, and it does get better the more colors you're running. It also can tap for any color, so you can activate any of the planets regardless of the color of your deck, as long as your Astronomer sticks around. It's great for fixing, sacrificing lands, or any sort of planet deck in general. Numidian Lightseed can also get you the planets, as well as the number of utility lands from the Stellar Sites bonus sheet. I think the land it drafts isn't the most important thing, but the fact that it's basically the first part of Bushwhack on a permanent. This has a few uses, like being able to be tapped for mana by a Gene Pollinator to cast spells, being an artifact for any synergy there, or being bounced and replayed cards with cards like Fear of Isolation. If you're already running utility lands that you want to activate anyway, Life Seed can also help with that. If you ever wish Karameto could be cheaper, then look no further. Warweave is not only cheaper, but it also doesn't have any restrictions on the land it gets, although it is random. We already had a number of landfall synergies, and you'll be ramping into plenty of mana while also thinning your deck of lands, ensuring you hit more creatures or card draw or whatever you need to keep the engine going. You'll also be seeing play in pretty much every green brawl deck, because at worst, it does trigger when you cast your commander each time, basically having your command tax. We'll have to see if it's too slow in Alchemy, but this will definitely be a hated brawl card. Mutable Pupa is surely one of the cards of all time. Pupa is very similar to Priest of Possibility, which did see a deck built around it, as getting a whole bunch of keywords on your 2-drop turned out to be very good. Pupa is a lot worse though, because you actually have to play out the creatures in order to get the full benefit. You could play a green X aggro deck with a bunch of keywords to creatures, but it doesn't really feel like it generates enough mana to be worth it. Especially when something that it would normally want to be paired with, like Horsey Revenant, can already give its keywords away anyway. On to Multicolor. We have a landfall creature that grants your lands the ability to draw cards. Similar to the Hydroponics Architect from earlier, this is a slow value engine that can draw you a bunch of cards off your lands, but does so very slowly. It also doesn't add any sort of upside to the land, like giving it the basic type, so you can't even guarantee a tutor by using a Evolving Wilds or Fabled Passage. The ability is strong but difficult to make consistent, and the body is also bad and doesn't really contribute much to the board, so it really only works as long as you can find your upgraded lands and survive long enough. Goodbye, Impetus Lootmonger. Hello, Impetus Lootmonger. Just when we finally thought it, along with all of the rest of Heist, rotated, we get it back in Axavar, Fate Thief. I personally think Heist is a fine mechanic conceptually, but in reality it leads to building your deck with only hard control or removal typo, and using Heist to either pull out card advantage, a win con, or even more removal out of your opponent's deck to use against them. And I think that the play pattern is really why people dislike Heist. It also doesn't help that Axavar has Void, which also triggers when you remove your opponent's permanents. So Axavar fits right into a removal-heavy deck. I'm not excited to see this card. If you're gonna make an Octopus card, you gotta make it an 8/8 for 8. I'm looking at you, Marv. Prototype X8 is a weird take on big creatures that want your graveyard filled. It's nice it can be a huge buy for as low as 2 mana, and it also has synergy with creatures that wants to die. It continues to fill your graveyard while giving you value, kind of like an awkward Civ 6 ceremony. It does take a lot more work to get set up than Civ 6, but the bodies you get from it are usually going to be better, and will have their additional ETBs or LTBs. We get a new legendary 5-color sliver in Sliver Weftwinder, and this might be the most interesting yet. It adds a bunch more random slivers to your deck, while drawing you cards, and lets you cheat out your slivers for free, kind of. It does seem like a great addition to any sliver brawl deck, and can even be another option to helm the lead. I don't think it has a place in Alchemy though, as there aren't enough slivers, and starting to build an engine in Alchemy would simply just take too long and too many resources to be worth it. Though Maroon Surveyor was so close to being an interesting card in paper, batching together a large number of unique mechanics. But because of Seek, it did get stuck in Alchemy. I do think having Seek be on it is very flavorful too, so I can't complain too much. This is definitely designed to be a brawl commander, similar to Vexor, and gives you a wide variety of different cards to try and build around. And if you have a number of these effects in your deck for Alchemy, then this can give you a bit of burn and sustain on a decent body. Venatel Orbit seems to be like an amazing card to me, on the prerequisite that you are playing a planet deck. Paying 5 mana just to get a planet on in the field is not worth it on its own, even with the charge counter bonus. However, 2 mana for 4 damage at sorcery speed is the going rate, with slight upside. And this upside is that you get a rampant growth for the land of your choice, and enough charge counters that you can realistically turn it on the same turn or the next. You have to imagine this as more of a mid-game play, because without the damage, the card is awful. 2 mana for 8 charge counters is a good rate. Going off Drill Too Deep, and 3 mana to ramp a land is a little expensive, but not affecting the board at all with such a heavy investment is just too much. It does give you exactly the planet you want, so if your goal is to activate a specific planet, then this card does put in the work, especially with the white planet, as you can use the additional copies of Orbit as removal every turn. Visa, or the Visa, I actually have no idea how to pronounce this, so I'm going to just call it Visa for now. Visa Orbital Overseer also lets you get exactly the planet you want on a well-statted body, and it additionally makes lander tokens each time you attack, which can either ramp on the following turns or be used to station your planets. It does so many things at such a good rate. Even if you aren't a planet deck, ramping a land, the color of your choice is great, and even if you don't care about artifacts, getting a 2/1 flyer each turn is great too. Visa doesn't even need to attack, so if a flying 4/4 isn't good enough for you, and all you want is an artifact to enter, you can also just throw away one of your random creatures to swap it for a lander token. The landers also work great as blockers. If you can get them to last a turn, then you can even crack them for more lands after you declare them as blocking. Visa doesn't currently fit into any deck at the moment, but we'll have to wait and see if any new decks forms with them at the center of it. I also do love Jellyfish. Speaking of new decks, we have had the bones of an affinity deck for such a long time now, and I wonder if Drix Interlacer was the missing card draw. In older formats, we've had the efficient card draw spells with affinity that keep the deck churning, but all we've really had to work with in Alchemy is Voyage Home. Drix Interlacer can kind of play a similar role if you have 6 artifacts enter after it. It does draw the same amount of cards as Voyage Home, but for 1 less mana. It also has the upside of being an artifact itself, which does help your affinity cards. Memory Guardian and Valkyrie Aerial Unit both benefit from it being a cheap artifact, while also fueling its card draw. When combined with Voyage Home, an affinity deck might finally have the 2 legs it needs to finally run. I always love getting references to real Magic cards, and our final card pulls back to our saddest fret. Spirited Simulacrum is the happy cousin to our Solemn Simulacrum, but it does much of the same thing. Ramps when it enters and draws cards when it leaves. And boy is it happy, because Wizards gave it a set of all new shiny toys. Seeking a Land is arguably an upgrade, as you aren't required to run basics at all, although it is a random land. Ensuring you don't get stuck with a land when it leaves is also usually an upside. Spirited also triggers when it leaves, not just dies, which was a part of the original design of Solemn, which I love. And this is already a strong change that is further enhanced by its work cost. There were plenty of times where I played Solemn and wish I could have sacked it immediately, and this not only gives me that option, but also lets me do it a second time as well. Solemn hasn't seen much play outside of some niche decks, so we'll have to see how this happy upgraded version plays out. Checklands are also added as a bonus 10 cards in order to make sure Alchemy has a somewhat playable mana base as well. With that said, this is the end of our Alchemy review. I already have a few deck brews in mind. Let me know what other decks you'd like to see and what you're brewing, and let's hope I don't forget to film the gameplay again. You'd almost think I don't play this game at this point. But yeah, shout out to the Patreons if you want to support me and all the cool or annoying projects I do. Feel free to join, and I will see you guys next time, on stream or in a video. Bye, peace out.
I'm a nobody. You understand? And you can't kill a person with no body. So why am I afraid? I'm not afraid. I'm afraid of the boogeyman. Who's the boogeyman? You figure it out.